Shakti Seer 2.
Everybody in this world is running after something. Most people are just trying to keep themselves alive amidst the deteriorating conditions of the age in which we live in. Because you have to rely on sustenance of some sort in this perfectly arranged world. Otherwise, what would those people be doing with their time? What are we doing with our time? Enjoying, looking to get peace and fulfillment and happiness. And we look around at the things which give us joy and peace and happiness. The things which give us joy and peace and happiness, important. And it's a constant struggle to fulfill ourselves with these things. This person goes and, goes to the bar for happiness and to socialize. The other person competes in dirt biking or some such thing that kids my age are into nowadays. Another person is just so locked in their job and taking care of their family, they're not able to even do anything. So their desire to express that gets pent up and pent up and pent up, and they have a midlife crisis. They cheat on their wives, they abandon their families, they do all these crazy things because they didn't get contentment from that. Even a lot of the people teaching spirituality, especially in the West, they're teaching you how to get more money, how to get a nice job, how to get a house. It's just an extension of materialism. It's the same thing that everyone is doing. Trying to fill themselves with things. So, ask yourself, why am I empty? Why am I empty that I have to grasp out at things to fill that hole in my heart? There is never enough things to grasp in the world to fully satiate that thirst for fulfillment that we all have. In fact, when we're in this mode of looking to things for fulfillment, we fall under the spell that's veiling us from God, veiling us from Bhagwan, from the absolute person, reality. We become ensnared by their illusory charm, their illusory force, their illusory power. And this illusory power is called Mahamaya, the great illusion. The great illusory power, rather. Maya itself is a living force. Its job is to do that, is to keep things locked into material form. So when you engage your senses in just seeking after this or that object to give me pleasure, to fulfill me, not only have you cut yourself off from fulfillment by saying, I need this object, which is, a condition of a previous illusionment with Maya. The previous attachment to Mayic objects causes us to even feel that disconnection. That same Maya which veils God from the objects, that same Maya power which causes you to lose your consciousness when you succumb to these sense object pleasures for fulfillment, that same Mayic power is the same one that's barring you from experiencing your inner divinity. So, that power, it builds and builds. It takes control. Through the material forces, the gunas. It takes control of us and forms a stronger affinity with that power which is veiling us from the inner divinity. It causes us to enter into like a dream type of world, a dream type of existence. An existence where we don't see things past things. We don't see one another past our objectifications of them. We don't see reality at all past our objectified view. What do I mean by objectified? I mean, just like Maya has the propensity, the effect of turning, or rather veiling the divine with mundane, with anti-divine, with material energy. It also causes you to perceive things. You, which are pure divinity, to perceive things in an objectified way. To see things in a way which is veiled by the material energy. Maya has a very strong force, all pervasive. The whole material universe is covered by Maya in most places. The exception being the sacred places and the sacred, people, the saints and mystics. And even the sacred places, if a person who is covered by Maya comes to this place, they don't see anything but Maya. So it's really on the perceiver. It's really on the person who observes whether or not Maya is perceived or whether Maya is transcended. Maya is the goddess of samsara. She is Durga, the prison warden of samsara. Maya is Durga, the prison warden of samsara. And it's her job to keep people locked in this prison. So within you and all around you is that Maya force, that Maya power, which is covering reality with complete illusion. And in the way that it covers reality with complete illusion, it causes people to fall asleep. It causes them to fall into a dreamlike state. Where that dreamlike objectified quality enters the mind completely, takes it over, and one is rendered helpless, one is rendered a spectator in their own reality, what they think is their own reality. They think that they're going around and everybody has been this and we are all, accustomed to this. We think that we're going around and controlling our life when we're in this Maya covered state. We think that we're going around and controlling our life, and we think that we are owning this or that person, or we are this or that job, and we're so this or that. But in reality, Maya is just deluding us further and further and further away from ourselves. Because underneath the veil is nothing but the self. The God is the supreme self. And there's a different type of Maya which works between God and the self called Yoga Maya, which is a spiritual Maya force. But that's not important for right now. The thing to be realized underneath this Maya power is, who am I? Where is this notion of a self? Where is this notion of a being, of something alive, something that I get a sense of myself as being, a soul or an Atma? And when we start to ask these questions, Maya can actually stop serving as the quality which is ensnaring us, and can actually start serving to benefit us. Because we can use Maya to say, okay, I am not my body, for instance. Because bodies are perishable, and it's impossible for a body to be begat from a body unless there was something other than a body as a root of all of this body creating. Otherwise, you have an infinite regress of bodies creating and coming from bodies and bodies coming from bodies. So I can see that I can't be this body, and that consciousness can't be primarily oriented around body. Body can't be the primary cause of consciousness, because it's impossible for a body to create a body to create a body infinitely back in time. There would have to be some kind of something else, which is not linear. So Maya helps to strengthen our realization through a negative kind of inversive effect. But still that dreamlike quality is within us, and we have to be on vigilant guard for it. It wants to tell us, yes, you are this conception of an object of a self. You are your name and your form, is what it wants to tell you. And it wants to lead you into making an ass of yourself based on that ignorance. But this can also be beneficial if you realize what's happening. So that's one side of the coin. Someone who is bound in Maya is trapped in a way, in a big way, searching for that part of that something that they know that they're missing. But never achieving it. And even if they do achieve it, the illusory potency comes and ruins it. You can never hold fast to it, right? We see that in this world. The second that anybody has some power or pleasure or fame, it's taken away immediately. So we see that this world is nothing more than a lesson. Nothing more than a schoolhouse. And schoolhouses are often very much like prison. You have to do your time before they let you out and complete all the courses. In that way also, this world is very much like a school and a prison. You know, they don't let you leave school, because then you'll be a nuisance to the rest of polite society. And according to the government, the school is where you ought to be. So likewise is our reality. According to the government of the universe, the gods and the supreme god and the goddesses, the various forces which control this cosmos, according to them, you ought to be in this prison school so that you can learn and break out of it. The false pleasures of this world, they might satiate, your belly for a little while. They might give you the experience that they're satiating your heart, but it's just preparing you to have that cut off, that rug taken out from beneath your feet. Look at, for instance, someone like Tony Montana, Scarface, right? Classic case, poster child of what I'm saying. The inner fulfillment that he was searching for, those manifesting as his beautiful wife, right, Michelle Pfeiffer, all of his power and influence and his drugs and such. He got to the very top of the mountain, and then what happened? And some other shark came along and knocked him down the mountain. Take the case with your, husband or wife or boyfriend or girlfriend. Sure, it's nice to have those things. It's nice to experience a little bit of that fulfillment in our emotional centers, in the belly and the lower heart. It's wonderful. And it can have its uses. But how often are those relationships perfect and not rocky? How often are you not forced to make your happiness dependent on another person's whim? How often are you forced to change due to their egoic control or projection of you? Let's take the example of, I could go through all of the creature comforts that people have and take them apart one by one. Take, for example, hanging out with your friends or whatever. If you did something to cross that friend, or if you said something that was not kosher with them, they wouldn't be your friend anymore. End of story. Or if if they saw a side of you that they didn't, that they judged you on. And even regardless, forget about that aspect of it. But say you're going out to hang out with your friends, whatever, quote unquote. Just going around these people, as long as they're just, a stereotypical materialist type person, as long as you're going around these type of friends, and I would definitely make a big difference between going around these type of friends versus going around friends in the Dharma. Big difference. If you have friends who put the Dharma first and foremost, truly, then there's only things to be gained by associating with them. But for those friends who don't put the Dharma first and foremost, what is first and foremost for them? Their egos. Period. Point blank. Even if you have friends who are nice and they don't abandon you, which is very rare, especially in this world. Even if you discarding that aspect, those friends, their egos are front and center. So what's going to rub off on you when you're around them? What's going to happen to your ego? That's right, it's going to come front and center. No way to avoid it. It's impossible. Impossible. I promise you, impossible. You cannot hang around your friends, quote unquote, without your ego coming back and coming into the fray. Impossible. So, what is that ego based on? That ego is based on depravity, lack, desire. All of these things come back when we're around these people. So, even that creature comfort that we're also engaged in, myself included, it's a really hard one to break. Even that creature comfort, unfortunately, can give us no fulfillment and is only detrimental to our consciousness, to our being. What are some other things that people, enjoy spending their time on? Nowadays, a lot of people are into like protesting and being an activist or whatever, being like a hipster like artist and all these things. That's all well and good. A lot of the college age kids nowadays are very like, pseudo intellectual activists, pseudo activists. You can't ever change this world. It's not ever gonna change. You can change people's hearts with a lot of help from the God, but changing the world is just not gonna happen. Most people are really just working to try to put some food on the table. So the whole world is running off of the cogs of survival and fear. At least that's how it is in my country. I don't know about you, Robin, in the Scandinavian countries where you actually have a government that gives a shit about the people. But in the rest of the world, we are governed by fear, because there's a constant fear that you're not going to have a roof over your head, that you're not going to have food to put in your belly. So this world's run by fear. Any kind of creature comforts or satisfaction that we try to get on top of that is just compounding the problem, just causing us to become even more ingrained in those samskaras, those volitions. So most people come here, they have a hard, rough time of things. It makes them very hard and rough, cold, selfish, ignorant, base. Most people, they come to this planet and they're lost in that kind of gyre, that kind of mechanism. These poor dandelion petals which have been blown into the wind and scattered about. They will go and blow further and more far and be scattered about further and more far. Most of the people that you see on this planet will be trapped in samsara for billions of years to come. Most of the people on this planet will be trapped in samsara, birth and death, for billions of years. Billions. Karma is very heavy. Maya is very heavy. It's so sad. And this samsara, it's not something enforced on them from, some kind of mean god up there, which is causing them to be trapped here. No. It's simply the entanglement of their own ignorance, their own karma, and their own delusion, which prevents them from experiencing this world of samsara as nirvana. The spiritual world is not up and away. It's right imminent here. My room is a pure land. My room is a pure land called Jamivati. You carry the absolute with you. That's why that these people are so ensnared. It's because they have the heaviness of the absolute manifesting as the heaviness of their karma. Mahamaya, the great illusionist. But it needn't be like that for you who are aware of these things. It needn't be like that for you who are making steps to actually come and to become a human being again, and to realize your true nature, and to realize your God nature, to realize God and heaven. It needn't be like that for you. Because the whole prison system is not set in stone. It's like a prison system of knots. And as the people struggle within the knots, they just serve to tie themselves more and more up in it. But if you relax, calm your mind, rest within the pureness of your mind, the knots start to loosen. The person who is struggling over here just getting more caught up in their knots. But the person whose mind has become detached, whose mind has realized its own nature, can't be ensnared, because the mind, the self by nature, is free, partaking of the same freedom as God. And so you're also free to ensnare yourselves. You're also free to be in samsara if you so choose. And it's not even really you doing the choosing. It's really Maya doing the choosing for you. And you think that you're doing the choosing. But it's right there. It's nowhere else but right there. Within your own self. If I was going to point you out the highest heaven, I wouldn't necessarily go this direction. This direction is where I would point out the highest heaven. Within the Shushumna Nadi, the central channel of our being, is contained everything. Inside this Brahma Nadi is the pure substratum of absolute being, Brahman. And within that substratum comes yourself. Your mind and consciousness are reflected from within the spiritual pole within you. They're constantly drawn up in that spiritual pole. You are that spiritual pole. It's the same power which ensnares you or liberates you, the Kundalini. And that Kundalini is so dynamic, that spiritual power is so dynamic, that Shakti of Shiva is so utterly dynamic. It's the animating force behind everything. And yet, how is it that it's the animating force behind everything, but it's also not far? There's no separation between each of the things which it's animating. It's that spiritual divine force which is the background of consciousness, which is the background for awareness, which is all pervasive. It's the background for that infinite God which was shattered into a million pieces, like the mirror being broken. And that infinite God is not up in a cloud, but is at the root of your being. He is like an imperishable banyan tree, and your heart is like the root of that tree. And so, water the roots of that tree of the heart to please God and to restore the divinity sprouting out of your own self. Or you can neglect to water the trees of that root, or the roots of that tree. You can neglect to water the roots of that tree, and what will happen is it will dry up, wither away, and die, needing to be planted anew somewhere else, using the power, the life force energy of sexual union. Because all of your energy is dried up. So only through the life force generated by a mother and a father can you enter into this world again. In a body, rather. As a living thing. You can enter into this world as a shade, as a ghost, a non-living thing. But in order to have life again, requires life force from the mother and the father. Because you've expended your life force, unfortunately, by allowing the tree of your divine being to wither away with all of the rough, harsh and dark attachments and energies that this world contains. So, the thing that people are looking for is the thing that's looking for the people. The thing that people are looking for is the thing which is looking for the people. Unfortunately, the people aren't looking for the thing which is looking for the people. The people are looking for the things which they think that they can enjoy. I'll tell you though, it's not enjoyment. It's no less enjoying than eating a mouthful of sand. Compared to drinking the sweet nectarian wine of heaven. Those pleasures of the earth are like taking a mouthful of sand compared to that. So even when these people are trying to fulfill this or that, pleasure, are you kidding? That's not pleasure, that's torture. The pleasure can be nowhere else but inside of you. It brings to mind a beautiful quote I read once by a Tibetan Lama, who said, "I have visited countless temples, stupas, sacred places, but I have never visited a temple with more pleasure than my own body." Verily, you are that pleasure. You are Rama. Rama both means living beings. It also means Ramana, means pleasure. And Rama, as living beings, indicates living beings in relation to God. Rama, as those who give pleasure to God, receive infinite pleasure. Because God is of the nature of infinite pleasure, and you are of the nature of God. So, this inversion has to begin with controlling the mind, drawing the mind away from the senses. And it culminates in drawing the mind towards the Supreme Absolute Reality, Bhagavan, the Blessed Lord. Because we'll find that when we draw our mind towards Bhagavan, it really wasn't us doing anything. It was Bhagavan drawing our mind to himself. And so, we can either be controlled by the material forces, or we can be controlled by the spiritual forces. Either way, you are a slave. This is why Bayezid al-Bastami said, "I made 4 mistakes in the preliminary steps in this way. I thought that I remember him. I thought that I know him. I thought that I love him, and that I seek him. But when I reached him, I saw that his remembering of me preceded my remembrance of him, that his knowledge about me preceded my knowledge of him, that his love towards me was more ancient than my love towards him, and that he sought me in order that I would begin to seek him." So when a consciousness is externally oriented, it perceives itself as really real and filled with all of these good qualities, correct? Most people think that. When they're externally oriented, their mind is focused on themselves, and they feel that themselves is full of all good qualities. Likewise, when the mind is focused on the God, on internally, not externally, one sees the God full of all good qualities. And there's no real distinction except in terms of quantity. So the way that you saw yourself previously is the way that you should see God afterwards. You see yourself in control of this material world before that, when the mind is externalized, the self in control of the material world. When the mind is internalized, you see the material world in control of God, or rather being controlled by God. X that out. You see the material world being controlled by God. And to a certain extent, you who exist in the material world do control God by your desire and love, and by your thoughts and your whims. In a sense, you do, but that's not what I meant to say anyway. When the mind is externalized, you see the self in control of the material world, when in reality the material world is in control of the self. But when it's inverted onto the internal spectrum, when you look within, you see yourself controlled by God. Perhaps that would be the better version of that analogy. See yourself controlled by God rather than you controlling the material world. Yourself controlled by some person who is all peace, all love, all bliss, all strength, all detachment, all opulence, all beauty. This is by definition the word Bhagavan, which means the Lord in Hinduism. It's how they refer to their God as Bhagavan. It means by definition those good qualities that we previously projected on ourselves, which we are now seeing as fundamental in the Supreme Self, who is within all selves. And so we begin to draw our affinity towards that and try to exemplify that, to embody that, to let that fill us. This is like Bhagavan, his qualities become like a big, like water in a jar. And through meditation on him, he fills the heart with this jar, pours it into the heart. Through faith, through chanting his names, through remembering him. I'm speaking in a very personal way. But if you prefer a more impersonal view of God, that's also equally appropriate. God is hard to understand. One of the names of God in Hinduism is Kannada, I believe is the name, Kannada. Hard to understand. Either way. Place your attention on that absolute reality. I begin talking about this solely so I could say, place your attention on the absolute reality. That's all I wanted to say in this 50 minutes. That's all that I needed to say. But I had to go through it bit by bit to explain. To lead up to what I wanted to say, which is simply that the absolute reality is in you. Period. Put your mind on it. Put your heart on it. Put your thoughts on it. Put your trust on it. Put your reliance on it. Take shelter of it only. Nothing but it. Him. Because That absolute reality is the only thing which exists. The whole design of creation is nothing but a manifestation of its wisdom. And it is wisdom embodied. Infinite wisdom embodied. So when you get the scent of that, you can begin to understand a little bit about who you are, about what you are, about what reality is. And you will only care to really read and to think and to learn about that. Like, for instance, I found myself on Facebook today being almost very unattracted, almost to the level of disgust, by a picture which I saw where there's a person meditating in the universe and all behind him, and it makes it look like this person is the great cosmic God, you know. And it made me realize how much that in the New Age there is the focus on me being elevated. I don't think like that at all. And I become elevated. How does that work? I never think, okay, I am, enlightened, high, elevated, this or that. Nor do I ever waste my time reading any pseudo teachings which place the emphasis on how elevated the individual is. Never. My interest is completely on Bhagavan. I read things pertaining to Bhagavan's nature. I look at pictures pertaining to Bhagavan's nature. I listen to songs about Bhagavan's nature. This is what I really wanted to say this morning. And when I do that, I lose myself. There's no me there to be glorified or individual to be put in this cosmic position. There's just Bhagavan. And a little, myself effaced in that light. I can find no self. You just become lost in that Bhagavan. And that Bhagavan is infinitely more glorious, more perfect, more blissful, more wise, more loving, more everything than an individual could ever be. Unless that their mind and heart was perfectly trained on that. And even then, there are limits to expression. So my heart is trained on the absolute, and therefore the absolute is trained on my heart also. Do you think that God would forget someone at the time of death who spent their whole lives training their heart on Him? No way, Jose. And God, even in the impersonal or personal form, whatever you want to view it, doesn't matter. If you place your heart on the absolute reality, the Brahman, then the Brahman is what you'll attain. Because the Brahman is alive. And even though it looks like the heart is placing itself on the Brahman is placing the heart upon it. And so that's another secret of the inversion of thinking of yourself as the controller of this reality versus allowing yourself to be controlled by the Supreme Controller. The embodiment of perfection and dharma that you can feel in meditation, that enters into you in meditation. Meditation or listening or satsang or kirtan or any other way where you connect or unite with the Absolute. Yoga means to link upwards. Yoga means to link up. Comes from the word for yoke. Actually, the word that we have in English, yoke, comes from the Sanskrit root, juk. Juk. The same word that the Hindus get their yoga from, yoga. You'll hear them sometimes call it jog. Yoke, juk. And also another interesting thing is the term we have God is also Sanskrit. The term God comes from Sanskrit huta, which means to invoke, and it's an epithet for Indra. But what I wanted to say was that the word yoke, meaning to link up through spiritual practice, is interesting. To make yourself like the very same life that's within the egg, the very same energy, to unite yourself, to link up with the yolk of the cosmic egg, the very essence, that golden essence, which is within you, the center, just like the yolk, just like the yolk of an egg is centralized. Uniting with that center yolk is yoga. So then, you become filled with God's qualities. This is why that great masters are called Bhagawan. This is why that Narada Muni was called Bhagawan. Is he the same as God? Yes! You're damn tooting. It's irrelevant to even make any differences at all. Does that make me a pure monist? No. I'm not saying that there aren't any differences whatsoever between a saint who is called Bhagavan versus the infinite Bhagavan within everything. I'm not saying that there's no difference, but no difference worth even mentioning. Because that person is so thoroughly fixed upon Godhead, thoroughly fixed upon the apex of being, the absolute reality existing at the very top of the mountain, which is within your own heart. Remember, your own heart mind, your own mind stream, which is what everything is a stream of consciousness. It's not objectified. Only the power of that Maya makes it look objectified to our brain and our senses. But really, all of reality is a stream of consciousness. And that person, that saint who has made themselves so close to Bhagavan, who has brought themselves so close to that supreme entity, for that person, their mind stream becomes permeated with the beautiful perfume-like essence of Bhagavan's graceful, lucid energy. That's why it's said that saints, their bodies exude fragrances. You'll find this all throughout the Christian, Muslim, Hindu, Buddhist world. Stories of saints whose bodies exuded perfume. How is that? It's because the mind stream is always flowing, because nothing is really separate. It might appear separate, but nothing is really cut off from one another in the truest sense. I mean, I can't take your body and like press it through my body like a ghost or something like that. I don't mean it like that. But within your body, the space where your mind rests is the same space where my mind rests. Likewise, it's the same space where Bhagavan rests. The space of the heart. And so, that space of the heart is an internal play. A divine play, a divine Leela. And you simply have to take part in it to realize that it's there. Otherwise, the Leela goes on without you, and you enter the Leela of death and destruction. All you have to do is to gather your mind, gather your senses and energy into yourself. And there's various ways to do this. Kirtan, reading, listening, meditation, chanting, nam, japa. Gather your energy and awareness within that spiritual chasm within you. That's what japa does, by the way. Japa translates your energy and consciousness into that spiritual chasm, that shushumna, and makes it into the same force as the gods. Makes it into makes your mind and consciousness into the embodiment of the qualities of all of the gods. Because everything is interconnected. So, is that good? That's what I wanted to say. That's about the summation of it. The Absolute is within your heart, and you can make it manifest whenever that you like. It's not cut off from you. It's not separate from an object you. It's the very root of your being. And that root of your being, that God, requires you to understand, to know Him. Not to understand in every little technical sense. No. To know Him. To remember that Bhagavan. And Bhagavan's qualities will come out. Bhagavan, who is the embodiment of all the gods and goddesses' qualities, will come out. And there's nothing left to do except to enjoy that and to go about a blissful existence. Where Bhagavan will lead you on to more and more delightful experience. Okay, so that's what I wanted to hammer home, that focus on the Absolute. Focus on Bhagavan. Put your thoughts, heart, your song, everything that you have, put it upon the absolute reality, not this reality. Because the more that your mind is on this reality, the more that your mind is on this reality. The more that your mind stream is blended in this reality, the further you are from the Absolute, the more it becomes something distant and far off, and not an immediate experience within. Maya power, which causes you to lose your consciousness when you succumb to these sense object pleasures for fulfillment, that same Mayic power is the same one that's barring you from experiencing your inner divinity. So, that power, it builds and builds. It takes control. Through the material forces, the gunas. It takes control of us and forms a stronger affinity with that power which is veiling us from the inner divinity. It causes us to enter into like a dream type of world, a dream type of existence.
Shakti Seer 2.
Everybody in this world is running after something. Most people are just trying to keep themselves alive amidst the deteriorating conditions of the age in which we live in. Because you have to rely on sustenance of some sort in this perfectly arranged world. Otherwise, what would those people be doing with their time? What are we doing with our time? Enjoying, looking to get peace and fulfillment and happiness. And we look around at the things which give us joy and peace. We become ensnared by their illusory charm, their illusory force, their illusory power. And this illusory power is called Mahamaya, the great illusion. The great illusory power, rather. Maya itself is a living force. Its job is to do that, is to keep things locked into material form. So when you engage your senses in just seeking after this or that object to give me pleasure, to fulfill me, not only have you cut yourself off from fulfillment by saying, I need this object, which is, a condition of a previous illusionment with Maya. The previous attachment to Mayic objects causes us to even feel that disconnection. That same Maya which veils God from the objects, that same So, ask yourself, why am I empty? Why am I empty that I have to grasp out at things to fill that hole in my heart? There is never enough things to grasp in the world to fully satiate that thirst for fulfillment that we all have. In fact, when we're in this mode of looking to things for fulfillment, we fall under the spell that's veiling us from God, veiling us from Bhagwan, from the absolute person, reality. And happiness the things which give us joy and peace and happiness important. And it's a constant struggle to fulfill ourselves with these things. This person goes and, goes to the bar for happiness and to socialize. The other person, competes in dirt biking or some such thing that kids my age are into nowadays. Another person is just so locked in their job and taking care of their family, they're not able to even do anything. So their desire to express that gets pent up and pent up and pent up, and they have a midlife crisis. They cheat on their wives, they abandon their families, they do all these crazy things because they didn't get contentment from that. Even a lot of the people teaching spirituality, especially in the West, they're teaching you how to get more money, how to get a nice job, how to get a house. It's just an extension of materialism. It's the same thing that everyone is doing. Trying to fill themselves with things